So most of us in our lives have made assumptions that had later consequences on ourselves because of our lack of communication with one another. Well, today I'll be talking about how Pearl Harbor had resulted in a similar instance in which it experienced a surprise attack from Japan after creating assumptions from the military, assuming that Japan was not actually going to attack. And this led me to my thesis, in which I stated that miscommunications among government and military leaders had definitely influenced Pearl Harbor's readiness for a surprise attack against Japan. Now, we may think that President Roosevelt and Admiral Stark, who had the largest impact in withholding information because of their assumption that disclosing it to other military leaders could have a potential harm in which they viewed it as. Now, what we would think that what would cause President Roosevelt and his dilemma of withholding information from the Pacific base commanders and why he would do that. But we'd think that President Roosevelt knew that Japan had revoked from being allies, but didn't really want to spark a war because other relations with other countries were starting up and there was a lot of tension with Italy and Germany. And it wasn't until November 26, 1941 that it was decoded that Japan didn't want any relations with the U.S. because Roosevelt was cutting off supplies and resources to Japan, and all these embargoes were just putting tension on Japan. And also, there was U.S. war plans that had been leaked out on the 12th of August, 1941, by a Chicago newspaper, according to Burtness, and this definitely had an impact on how everyone else, especially military leaders, were assuming the intentions of the enemy, which happened to be Japan at that time. So Roosevelt wanted to evade all acts of war because he specifically stated that Japan were to make the first move and we wouldn't inflict any danger upon in the first place. So, and this leads to why what has influenced President Roosevelt's assumption. And President Roosevelt believed to be reassured by Admiral Stark, who stated Pearl Harbor was prepared for any type of surprise attack, right? And he gave 11 warnings to Admiral Kemmel throughout previous months, stating that this dispatch is to be considered a war warning, which was given out a few times to alert other leaders in the naval operations out at Pearl Harbor. And this was kind of a similar instance to The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and that all these warnings were not really taken too seriously. And the reason for these warnings were believed or assumed by Roosevelt that it would discourage Japanese spies from initiating any intentions of attacking. So this is when President Roosevelt took action, and its outcome was not allowing Stark to specifically relay the message to the other generals, such as General Kinnell, according to Copeland, that were also in charge of preparing their men for any type of attack on the base as well. And he felt that these other relations with Italy and Germany that made him doubt that he needed to inform the naval commanders also was a reason for his assumption, as well as his recent threatening intentions towards Japan After Japan broke those relations, he specifically was not creating positive relations with them, and that kind of sparked more attention. So he believed at that time that it was definitely going to occur some sort of battle, in which he thought it would be in Pearl Harbor, but yet he didn't inform anyone. So we come to think that President Roosevelt didn't want to initiate any harm to the military, therefore not informing the military leaders of this potential harm, which impacted everyone else because this battle could have been prevented with an extra alert from the higher up officials, such as the president, and this led to many deaths in Pearl Harbor.